Hi, I'm Jeffrey Burandt, co-creator of Killer Bad, and you're watching Two Geeks Talking.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Two Geeks Talking is an entertainment industry interview show where we interview the creative people from the comic, film, TV, movie, and video game industries. And of course, I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. We're joined today by a very talented writer. He is new to the show, so this is his first time on, so I appreciate him taking the time to come on the show itself. We're diving into the world of superheroes. We're diving into the mindset of a very talented writer. We're dealing with Jeff Burandt.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm good, Kurt. How are you?
Doing good. You know, I love new interviews. I love seeing new writers that are in the comic book genre that love and are passionate about what they are doing. And you have a Kickstarter as well, so we'll dive into this like headlong because I know you have a limited amount of time. But for those that don't know anything about yourself or your comic, tell us all about yourself.
I'm a writer living in Brooklyn, New York. Grew up in North Texas, went to UT, and then moved here for grad school to get an MFA in fiction writing. Shortly after getting my MFA, I started, that was all prose work. And was working on an unfinished novel excerpts and stuff during all that. During my studies, I immediately got a gig writing this Details magazine. And I always had a great love of comics. And I got a gig writing this series of special advertisements for Amstel Light beer, and it was as a comic book. It ran for 3 issues. So it was a 3-part little story. It's probably still the best I've gotten paid for writing comics. Dove in headlong to comics ever since. I didn't completely ditch the prose. I still write prose short stories here and there. I was also writing profiles at the time, for magazines and stuff, which felt like homework, which I didn't really enjoy. And so I dove into comics as a lifelong fan. At the time, I also had a sci-fi rock band called Americans UK Comics, which were the sci-fi adventures of our rock band, of our real life rock band, so that we could make comic book music videos and stuff like that, where the lyrics to the songs were the captions and dialogue to the comics. And we would make little videos out of that combination and also these comic books. I basically pitched the same thing, sci-fi rock band, but at aimed at the teen level, which got me a book called Odd Schnoz and the Odd Squad at OE Press. That was with artists Dennis Culver and Ramon Villalobos. That was about a young teen band. And so my real life band then made a soundtrack. My co-producer, Peter Boyko, who co-wrote the album with me, he had a niece who was in School of Rock, like the movie. Oh, nice. She was in School of Rock. So she could really sing. And this was about, 16-year-old girls in a punk band. We got to make songs ostensibly by a 16-year-old band where we had a real 16-year-old girl belting out these punk songs. And then I've been making comics ever since, usually lots of short stories published in places like Heavy Metal or Create Our Own Heroes through Image and things like that, and constantly pitching longer series in the background. And like you said, so now I'm trying my first Kickstarter, my first comic book Kickstarter.
Well, you've gone through a lot. Looking at what you've done, though, you've done a lot in your career, obviously. Now, you just piqued my interest. Sci-fi rock band. Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Thank you.
That's amazing. What were some of your genres you were touching upon when you were singing?
One of our popular songs was I, 8 Man, where we made a comic book to it, a comic book music video, where it was about very simple songs that would have, not always simple songs, but songs that have a beginning and end narratively. So this one was just immediately at some post-apocalyptic world where everyone is kind of a mutant. And so this was about the life of an 8-man in a 2-minute punk song. So we covered the gamut. We would do, it was mostly, we had one song called White Fur, Black Leather, which was about fashion in the post-apocalypse, because, Mad Max the Mad Max world is actually very fashionable because it's produced by Hollywood. So it's kind of like a look at that. A song called Lights Out in Zap City, which was about evil superheroes taking over and kind of like the helpless plight of the humans beneath them. And the whole point was to have each one have an actual narrative arc within the song, which then would also help me produce these comic book shorts that tied in with them.
That's something I have not seen actually at all in the 12 years I've been doing
Well,
this.
if you go to Americans-UK.com, you can see there's like one video that's on YouTube that I still haven't uploaded to our website called Phenomenana. They are very well produced videos with sci-fi themes where we fight these robotic spheres, lots of CGI. I have a friend, Darren Morano, who is a wizard at this stuff. And so we get to make videos together every once in a while. He's who made our Kickstarter video where we did a shot-for-shot recreation of the Rob Liefeld 501 Jeans commercial from 1992 or so. And then also in our interview, we animated a lot of our comics, and Darren was responsible for all of that. But yeah, Americans-UK.com, you can see our comics. You can see some of them at my website, which you're displaying, jeffwrights.com. America's UK was a big part of my life for a long time. And I think we're going to release some new songs in 2022 and probably with a new fancy video too.
Let's talk about, of course, your newest Kickstarter.
Yeah.
This is, of course, for your comic Killer Bag.
Yes.
I got to see the preview. I love it. This is one of the more highly produced Kickstarters I've seen in a while, which is great to see.
Thank you.
Talk to us about this particular comic, because you wouldn't be doing a Kickstarter if you didn't have a plan or if you didn't have a great comic to produce.
Thank you. Well, Jason Gongor, the artist, and I, we work together a lot. We've done some heavy metal stories together. We've got this book that's getting pitched around. We get lots of verbal green lights on, but we need you to make more. The standard is you're not going to get solicited unless you have 3 issues of your comic done, especially if you're not a big name creator who's proven themselves in the field, right? And we were working on this longer term project and meeting about it. And we were having lunch and talking about our love of that first generation Image Comics, the 7 Founders stuff, and what a big deal it was at Marvel for when guys like Rob Liefeld and Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson took over characters, or you just started first seeing like their character designs and stuff. I remember how there's a cover of What If, like Rob Liefeld's, I think, earlier first Marvel work was a What If Wolverine was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Just seeing how he drew Wolverine on that cover, I was hooked. I think whatever your criticisms of Rob Liefeld are, they appeal greatly to teen readers for whom most of these superhero comics should probably be for. Same with McFarlane, same with Jim Lee, like all those guys, Mark Silvestri, that Chris Claremont, Mark Silvestri, Uncanny X-Men run is still one of the best reads, I think, out there in comics, and so much has to do with Silvestri's cartooning. He does not get enough credit for just his facial expressions. He looks like a newspaper strip comic artist, like that level of detail. And to now know as an adult, like how fast he was probably working, the deadlines involved with these books and how everything, I don't know about production of Uncanny X-Men in the 1989 or whatever, but it seems like they're put together very quickly under constant extreme deadlines. And so just knowing that just blows me away. But anyway, so we were talking about our excitement about these books and how I had a story, like when I first tried to write a comic when I was in college in the early 90s, that had these plot points, and then Jason had all these character designs and these names like War Wound, who's the protagonist of our comic and kind of the main guy you see on our covers and stuff. He had some names and some character designs of just him playing around with 90s themed superheroes, who are always like two vowels slammed together, blood sport, these very staccato, often violent names. So we just started riffing on that. It was very organic. By the next time we met, I had a full outline and he had character design. So it completely derailed us from our long-term project, but because I think we got so excited about it. And so then we were just making it because we were so excited about it. It kind of was it was happening. It was getting done more quickly. And also it allowed Jason to try a new style. His work is usually a lot darker and grittier. And as you can see from our preview pages, it's almost like his style is the side of a coin-op Capcom versus X-Men from the early 90s. Like it's that painted manga, 90s manga influenced look. Anyway, I'm just so excited for people to see Jason's work on this because it looks fantastic.
It does. Yeah. That was the one thing I saw, because I was expecting kind of like a dark dystopian style thing. But as soon as you flip to the next few pages, it's just like you're hit with this burst of color.
Yeah.
And it's incredible to see. And yeah, I was going to mention about the Marvel versus Capcom video game.
Oh, good.
I remember so well.
Yeah.
So it's like those types of characters just kind of popped off the page.
Yeah.
And it was amazing to see. You kind of touched upon this though, but world building and character creation obviously are the epicenter of comics, plain and simple,
Sure.
especially with what you've created with Killer Bad. What did you draw from to create these characters? Like specifically the individual characters that you've created for this particular set.
It was organic in that, like I said, with Jason had some character designs and names. So a lot of it was, okay, let's use this name and then who is this character? Then as the plot begins to emerge, you need characters to fulfill certain roles, which then defines their character, right? A lot of these characters are meat for the grinder. The overall concept of Killer Bad is 3 done-in-one stories, 30 years apart. This first one is 1995. The next one will be 2025 and then 2055. We move through time like that, and we also move through genres. They'll all be superhero, but they'll be different horror genres. So this first one, Killer Bad 1, is the slasher genre. The 6 Squad 6, who is our outlaw team of superheroes, a la X-Force or The Boys or Suicide Squad. A team of outlaw heroes descending upon an island to retrieve a powerful artifact, and then immediately getting sideswiped by a super slasher serial killer.
Then the world itself, I mean, you're creating 3 different worlds, basically. Looking at those types of worlds, obviously sci-fi and the superhero genre, you can run wild with it. How are you going to be able to mix horror but not touch upon the dystopian possible future?
A lot of it's pastiche, right? You've seen this before. We're referencing this, we're even doing that with our covers and our imagery. We're making you know that we are referencing slasher movies by our covers and posters, which is a recreation of Friday the 13th, the Friday the 13th movie poster. So we're kind of setting up these worlds by referencing other points in pop culture of the time that they're in. When we're participating in different genres, you're hitting those genre beats, which is another familiar touchstone. To your point, maybe more. Also, I would say each issue is kind of how we get to our world building, because this first issue is just you're thrown into it. All this violence happens, and who survives? And then who survives is the story of book 2. And then by book 3, you're getting the person behind the curtain, what's been really going on this whole time. And it's also taking place on New Detroit, which is the city of Detroit hovering on giant fans with sewage pouring out in the sky. And so, which is going to be, it's a fantastic splash page. And so, so that's how we reference that dystopian future more. We're putting it in this like kind of cyberpunk context that you're used to seeing in other media, and then just telling our what is actually kind of like a gothic romantic horror story for that issue, and that kind of more Spawn like, where we're revealing all the powers that be behind the first 2 issues, giving a good satisfying ending to hopefully answer everyone's questions that have built up in the first 2.
It's funny you mentioned Detroit. I literally live across the river from it.
Oh, good. Well, we'll have to, not that we make any hard references, but I'll have to run it by you to make sure we don't do anything stupid.
As long as you get the Rensen and the skyline right, I think you can't go wrong.
For each issue, we want to have a different movie cover reference, a different movie poster. So for this one, I want to do Neo Detroit is about to explode. Have a nice Akira cover in there. You can see that cover, right, with the black sphere moving out, but so it'll just be Detroit specific buildings in that arrangement.
Yeah, just leave Canada alone. You'll be fine.
Okay.
As a writer, this is a tough industry to be in general,
Sure.
especially being in New York too,
Mhm.
especially being a creative person that you are. All 3 books written out?
It's all
Still written?
scripted. It's all breakdowns are complete for the whole series. As soon as we wrap this Kickstarter, Jason will be laying down the line work for issue 2. And so for issue 1, it's a mostly finished book. I think 20 of 23 pages are colored now. 8 pages are lettered already. We took a break from that because there's no reason to continue lettering once we had the preview out. Yeah. And then I think I'm even working on the cover, like one of the movie poster covers for issue 2 now, because I want that to be like the back page cover of this one, saying, coming in 2022.
Out of all the characters that you've written for this particular series, what was the most difficult thing to write about opposite gender or non-gendered characters?
I think this weird thing has come up. I think the hardest has been walking a line of having a Black character and working hard in a 90s book, which is where he first appears, which is the character Death Cheater, which might tell you whether or not he survives. Death Cheater is making him like kind of appear in the first book in a very 90s way, and they're almost therefore making him a token Black character, and then finding a way to not make that happen and make him important through the rest of the series. It's something I struggle with because I just don't know if I'm pulling it off or not. in a book of horrors and violence. I'd say that's the hardest, because it just gives me anxiety in that I don't want to participate in that portrayal if I can help it. And likewise, other genders, we have a very sexy, and again, trying to do this like stereotypical 90s thing, we have a character named Molly X, who, like her name, her powers are like the drug. She has low-level telepathy powers where she kind of controls people of either sex or gender or orientation. She makes them dumb and horny, and she wears like very little clothes, and then manipulates them and turns them into questionably moral super people. I don't know how that's going to read in current writing. It's something like we're kind of doing on purpose and being ironic about, but is that enough in a portrayal? She's a character who you see on the cover, and she's kind of like behind the scenes, like not part of the field mission. She's operating on things behind the scenes. She doesn't get a lot of screen time, at least in the first issue, because of that. And I wonder about the perception. I hope that our intent of like capturing a moment and then but also trying to elevate that moment to modern standards. I hope we were both successful in that, and that it gets read that way.
As a writer, though, what is the most misunderstood aspect about your career that people have of you?
To let people know outside of like comics Twitter that you have a career, or that you are even a writer. Like, do I have a career in writing? I get paid for it every once in a while, but in creating comics, that's definitely more money out than in. Much like creating a rock band was a lot of the times. It's built upon the goodwill and passion of the other people involved. It's a struggle. I tell people, because I do have a career outside of the comics industry that allows me to fund these projects, to now hopefully the money back on a Kickstarter, because that's what's happening with this Kickstarter. Our $6,000 that if we make our $6,000 limit, that means I get I break even, probably under break even, honestly. And then anything past that, we've become profitable. And then Jason and I split the profits from there. People don't realize, maybe outside of the industry, is that's the way it is for any publisher, especially if it's something you're keeping the rights to. The publisher is getting on the hook for actually printing the copies and those costs. But then you got to pay that money back. Or if you got an advance, you got to pay that money back. I got an advance for my Oni book, and that money had to be paid back before the book became profitable, on top of printing costs and all that. So I guess that's something that's difficult to explain to people, especially given that in like the current marketplace or job marketplace, it's pretty much the writer's responsibility to produce the comic, to be on the hook for funding, which is, I think, why so many people are going to Kickstarter. But then you get into the rub of, will they be able to finish it? If they're actually using this money to fund their comic, then will they be able to finish it? Will the team hold up? Well, did they ask for enough money to be able to get the artist to stick around long enough, and things like that? And again, that idea of the passion and will of the creators to be a part of it is a big part, because there isn't a lot of money coming in. It's I think a lot of money out, and I think for a lot of people it's basically a hobby that sometimes pays.
Plus, Kickstarter is a second job, quite literally.
Yes, it has been overwhelming. I'm taking a little bit of a break this weekend just because I'm constantly on my phone, but it's also like so addicting in that way. The serotonin rut, you're just constantly getting tweets and likes and just constantly on my phone coming up with new Instagram reels and BS like that. But that's kind of fun. And yeah, it gets all this engagement in a way that's like playing some sort of video game, like some, sim video game on your phone. And now I'm kind of like, at week 2, I'm a little bit burnt out. My hands hurt a little more from holding my phone a little more. I'm sick of posting about my stuff all the time. So we're doing a retailer exclusive cover, few retailers on board, and I really want these next couple of weeks to get more on board. So I got the colors back for our cover today, and they were amazing. And I immediately had to like stop what I was doing and make an Instagram post about zooming in on break speed. He's our speedster character with like the Cyclops meets Darkhawk type of helmet and leather jacket. We've got our 90s tropes. We've got the superhero tights with leather jacket. We've got our mulleted supervillain, all that stuff.
It's funny because this industry is so fickle sometimes as well too, when it comes to, some people are burnt out by the superhero genre. Other people just crave that type of genre. It's amazing to see how everyone is either attracted or just sick of the genre in itself. What makes yours different that people will have a fresh take on?
This is maybe a fresh take that I'm borrowing from Garth Ennis to a huge degree. But if you're sick of superheroes and want to see handsome, pretty superheroes then get murdered in gory, horrific ways, this is your comic also. I watched Suicide Squad last night and found great glee in the levels of violence and humor in that book, and was like, oh, this is what at least we're attempting to do. I'm no James Gunn, but it definitely falls within that same take. I guess I fall into the category of not sick of superheroes, but the movies and TV shows scratch that itch a lot for me more than the comics do. I'm much more likely to be reading Image comics mostly, and people's creator own work, and then buying I buy lots of omnibuses of these, I'm addicted to all these Chris Claremont run omnibuses that are coming out. I can always go back to Hulk and Batman. I realized, especially during the pandemic, I realized I was reading lots of Hulk and Batman comics because those are kind of like my comfort food of fiction. But so what we're doing differently is we're taking all those tropes and we're mixing it up with a slasher movie for this one. I think it's thrilling. I think, it was trying to find a way as a writer to show off Jason's art, and in a way that those early Image books did, obviously, with big splash pages and lots of cool poses and stuff. And the way that I figured out to do that is make it a slasher movie so that you get those kind of big action beats, but maybe it's not the exact same ones you're gonna pick up in Avengers or Justice League right now. Although those books aren't afraid to be adult and show gore anymore every once in a while. I was thinking of a Sentry ripping someone in half years ago, and they showed intestines. It definitely comes from that kind of level of deconstructing superheroes to some degree, but it's not even that complicated. It's more just utterly destroying them. And I think where I tried to elevate the script is a lot of this contextual 90s riffing. Like there's a lot of lyrics embedded. There's a lot of references. One of the things we have is as a part of our Kickstarter is the process junkie, where it's going to be a PDF showing, our breakdowns, a lot of Jason's preliminary art, the script to issue 1, but also I'm going to annotate this thing so that we're going to show you every 90s reference, both visually, you heard me mention Darkhawk and like 90s Cyclops. And, I think people of a certain age will be able to see that stuff. But I was in an interview with a much younger person on a podcast recently, and he did not get a lot of these references.
Well, it's safe to say that I'm well aware of the references you're talking about. So we're okay there. That's either showing my age or showing my geekiness or a little bit of column A and B. As a writer, though, you've written a lot in your lifetime, in your career. What made you realize that, yes, I could do this as a career? What was the first thing you wrote? I
doubled in English and philosophy, which were both 2 writing concentrations, which you're not even supposed to do. And I was always a huge reader. I read so much in high school and college, both prose and comic books. So that details gig, though, that was the indication that, because I got paid $1,500 to $2,000 for 12 panels of writing. And now the job was more than that. I actually had to make the job happen. And even though I had an editor, she didn't really know comic books. So I was a de facto editor. But still, it was like, that at the time was a month's worth of rent. That let me know that you could actually have a career. And then I got that Oni gig right off the bat too. Like I kind of came out swinging, and then immediately it was like, and you just think, well, now I'm going to be the next Bendis or whomever. And then it was just a slog of rejected pitches. I love making short fiction and short comics work. I do it a lot, and I think I'm particularly good at it in that I think I give a satisfying full short story as opposed to like an intro to someone's imagined larger comic that they might not ever get to tell. I'm excited for people to get to see my longer works again, because Ochnoz was 150 pages or so, 7 issues, which is kind of just hard to score as a creator these days. You're pitching 3, at most 5 issue things, usually 4 issue things. I had something go through that I'm not allowed to talk about with artist Sean Von Gorman. We just made it as a 40 pager single story that got picked up at the indie comics level. You're pitching stuff that publishers are willing to take a chance on, shorter things, and they want finished things. And so that's my philosophy now. I just make books on my own. I produce them on my own. We finish them, and either a publisher is going to pick them up, and if they say no, then I'll kickstart it.
Makes sense. It's easier to be an independent creator, not only as a writer, but also as a comic creator as well in this industry. And that's how a good majority of the past people I've spoken to have done it. They couldn't find a publisher or multiple publishers rejected their works. And they're like, screw it, I'm just going to create it myself.
I think to a point you made earlier about the level of quality of our book is I'm just always striving to make the highest quality. Like I want my stuff to match what you see out in the world from professionals. And so I think I'm pretty good at that, at making professional level work kind of across the board, because otherwise I don't want to share it with the world if I don't think it's very good.
What was an early experience where you learned that language had power?
I was the kid in school who had bad grades but was in AP classes and would get in trouble for reading while in class. So I was, completely taken over by literature early on. And then the flip side of that was I had a mouth on me and was constantly getting kicked out of class for being sarcastic. And you would see there were teachers who loved me who would be like laughing as they sent me to the dean's office or whatever. And those were happening concurrently. I was either getting in trouble for not paying attention and drawing a lot, right? I've probably drawn Wolverine 1 million times since I was 8 or something, other than Chris Claremont, and his artists that I knew who they were. I didn't know how much I loved Grant Morrison from early on until I looked back at my collection and stuff. I'm like, oh, I've been reading Grant Morrison since high school. I mean, I knew some of it stuff. So a big one was like Arkham Asylum was a big one for me. And that there was a Kid Eternity, like painted book from the 90s, prestige format. The covers were really striking. You put the two together and you got his full face and he had like circular, and it was this Italian painted artist. And at least Arkham Asylum was Morrison, if not both of them. I would write down some of the darker lines or stuff from Sandman, and I'd write that in my book, and then my mom would like find my student notebooks and look through them, and like, it'd be some dark, violent stuff that I was just parroting, and she'd be like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's from Arkham Asylum. See, it's the Joker that said that." So I guess those are good early examples of the power of the word for me.
The journey one takes, especially when reading as well, is pretty amazing and impressive. And it kind of sets them on their path to where they are today as well. But what literary pilgrimage have you gone on recently that has re-sparked your interest?
Well, time is minimal these days. I have a 3-year-old. That takes away a lot of reading time, honestly. I've been reading Stephen King novels, which when I was 15 or 16, I was really into classics already and starting to discover Camus and Dostoevsky. So I had a real chip on my shoulder, I think, early on about popular writing, Stephen King or Michael Crichton. And then like Jurassic Park got assigned to me once, and I read it and I loved it. And then I read all this Crichton. But for some reason, just because Stephen King was in mass media, like at that age, I was obviously familiar from his work from movies and TV. And also the covers were a little scary to me. I was a very frightened child who grew up to love horror. I started reading Stephen King finally, and I was like, oh my God, I wish I had read this when I was a late teen, say, and 20s. I would have devoured it all because I'm absolutely loving it. My faux intellectual literary brain would have eaten up his prose entirely because that's the language he's speaking. I've been really leaning into writing horror genre comic books. And so it's been a lot of rediscovering that stuff for me that I passed on when I was younger. So, and now I lean towards it. I've been really enjoying Joe Hill's body of work in the comic books. I just read Plunge. Stuart Immonen is a master.
What authors did you dislike at first, but they grew on to you later?
I can go through my list of I don't understand why this is so popular. I usually have the reverse. And especially with age, I don't find myself rereading stuff like I did when I was younger. I loved the Lord of the Rings series, right, in middle school. It was the most important thing in the world to me. Then as those movies were coming out, I was like, if I get interested in a movie, it has a really interesting premise, I always want to read the book first. To the expense at maybe ever seeing the movie, because if I don't get to read the book, I will forget to watch the movie. So I made sure and read all those Tolkien books again, and I was just like, boy, this is dry. This is really, if I read about one more page about how tired Legolas is, I'm going to throw this book through the window. It was easy actually to kind of cruise through them because of that. Those are an example, I think, of books that are, their media representation is better than the narrative they were found upon. I've been having that happen with movies recently, where I'm watching things that I didn't like or thought wasn't very good as a 20-something that now I'm loving. And I can't think of a great example of that right now. It's mostly these kind of like B-level horror movie stuff that I didn't appreciate the campiness at the time, perhaps. So I've been getting into, because of this book, I've been watching Friday the 13th movies, which I kind of escaped me. I'm about to revisit Halloween because I remember in my 20s, I watched that first Halloween movie and I thought it was really boring. And so now I kind of want to revisit with fresh eyes. I consume a lot of media about horror movies. I'm really into this podcast called With Gorley and Rust, where it's two comfy, cozy comedians talking about horror slasher movies. And I just love them as talking personalities. So I just love hearing them talk. I'm getting like a lot of insights to these movies and making sure and watching the movies they talk about so that I can experience the podcast with them. Horror as a genre in general is something that I am returning to, that I had a problematic relationship with when I was younger because I couldn't handle it. And then at some point it was like, Friday the 13th, Dream Warriors playing on repeat on HBO as a kid, which was what really broke me from that, because I was like, oh, I can handle this because it's funny. It's kind of like superheroes, actually. Like all the teens get powers. Freddy is kind of funny, and it turned out I can handle gore. So I'm a big fan of gore, it turns out.
As a writer, what is your kryptonite? I know there's Marvel. I couldn't think of the Marvel equivalent of kryptonite. So, what is your kryptonite as a writer?
What is my kryptonite as a writer? Well, I will say that I'm more plot centric, and I work out everything from the plot. So my worry is that my strength isn't emotional characters. That's my worry anyhow. And so I do try to write against that. So for my book, Ajnaz, that I was talking about earlier, I was very sick at the time of narrative captions in comic books, of the caption boxes, of getting, the narrator kind of telling you everything as it's happening. And so everything was pushed by dialogue. And I realized that it could be a weakness that we didn't get our lead characters' interior thoughts on things. But what I realized is that it's a tool to be able to convey emotion in a medium where it's very visual, but you don't have an actor to portray emotion. And while artists can do a great job, acting, and that's why they're co-writers as much as anything else, because of how they portray characters acting on the page. But you don't get that voice, you don't get the movement. That's why a lot of characterization can feel flat or cookie cutter in comic books. And then a tool to work through that is the narrative caption boxes, where you can use something like diary entries or just the voice running, that first person voice kind of narrating as you go along. It's to get an emotional reaction to the things that you can't just carry over in either exposition in the dialogue, which can take readers out of the book or feels really unnatural, or just a gasp and a facial expression might not just portray the complexity of emotions that you're actually trying to do. When required, I see that as a tool now, rather than something that I just got like, why is everyone doing this? It's so annoying. I'm tired of reading Batman's thoughts while he climbs a building. I think writing and publishing a full book without them and never using them, except for I think we lead you into the book with them, other than for location and time to help clarify that. We didn't really use caption boxes, and it was a very specific choice by me that I'm not sure was the best one in retrospect for that, the lack of emotion I could portray because of it. I don't know what my kryptonite is, but that's something I'm concerned with, portraying emotional depth in characters in comic books.
Is there anything that I've missed that you'd like to share and showcase with those that are watching and listening to this interview?
I just wanted to get funded at killerbad.com. We've made a really great book, and we want to get it into hands, and we want to be inspired to make book 2 for everybody. We're going to do it anyway. Kickstarter has been very exciting so far. We're at, I believe, 79% of our goal, and we haven't ended week 2 yet. I feel very strongly that we're going to make our amount, and hopefully we'll get past it and we can pay our creators more. Killer Bad, it turns out, Jason and I have been talking about this. We've been working on this comic in ways since the 90s, because they are inspired by some characters we wrote in the context at the time. And so it's been really cool to kind of revisit these old ideas that I wouldn't have even emerged again. Like, I don't know why I would have gone back to that well if Jason and I didn't have an exciting conversation at lunch like a year and a half ago. It just would have stayed to the dustbins of time. I think it was old enough writing where I don't know if I have any of the actual writing left, but I was able to remember some of the plot points and characters that I wrote in probably like 93 or 94, when without irony, just coming up with a character that was very 90s and of its time, because I was a kid reading those comics of that time.
Everyone has one person that inspired them on their path to where they are today. Who was that for you?
Boy, I think a huge part of it would have to be Brian Bendis and his Jinx World forum, which all leads back to him. A big part of that component of making comics, of details, and my first forays into self-publishing with Americans UK came with inspiration and getting the inside look at things from those Jinx World message boards in the mid-aughties, and listening to Bendis on those early podcasts of the time of Word Balloon, and watching his move from indie comics to, arguably one of the most successful comics writers of all time. He was an inspiration. He was kind and helpful the whole way through. I love his books. Him and Mike Oming have been, and those message boards have been a big inspiration, and literally showed me what to do and helped me build something of an audience just by posting our Americans UK pages. I was so excited. I would post each page as it was made, here, look at what we're doing. Look at what we're doing, which also worked to advertise my band and try to get people to come out of the shows and stuff. Yeah, I'd say Bendis was a huge inspiration in trying to build a career in writing comic books.
From a professional standpoint, you are an accomplished writer. You've been doing this for a while, and you've had a great amount of success with it. Do you consider yourself personally successful?
I do overall in life. I live a fairly comfortable life in Brooklyn with my family. I don't necessarily feel like a successful writer in that it is not my career, but I'm kind of satisfied with it not being my full career. I don't have problems with that. In fact, I might have it better in some ways with the hustle. I don't know if I could ever live a freelancer's lifestyle. That said, I hunger for publication. It is my number one goal. I don't know if it's the validation of someone saying yes, and also doing a lot of the work that you have to do as a self-publisher is nice. And it's nice to have people in your court actively trying to sell your book because they have, obviously a financial stake in it now. I guess I feel like a semi-successful writer. I'm proud of myself that I have someone else has published my work every year since I started this in 2006 or 2007. I've always gotten a short story out there. I've always gotten someone else to foot the bill to publish my thing in one way or another since then. So I do feel like a productive writer who completes things and can sell them to somebody. So I feel like it's a semi-successful writer. I guess I feel somewhat more borderline accomplished than successful, because at this point, the money that comes in is more fun money than anything anyone could live off of.
Sounds like adult money that you spend on fun things.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, those Chris Claremont Uncanny X-Men omnibuses are paid by 8-page heavy metal comic assignments.
There you go. Hey, money that is money well spent.
Yeah.
Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
I think Stephen King has a line that I'm going to butcher about you're a successful writer if you've ever gotten paid and used it to pay a gas bill. So by Stephen King's definition, I'm a successful writer.
The reverse of success is failure. How do you deal with your failures?
Well, I never give up on a piece of work, really. I'm very confident about the work I produce. I will revisit something many years later when I find the right artist, or I get lots of anthology work or short stuff in anthologies or publications like Heavy Metal and whatnot. And so much of that can be, okay, there's this anthology coming up with this theme. And so I go, oh, I wrote a short story. Here, let me find that old sketchbook. Here's an idea. And it's usually short, small enough of an idea that I never developed that is perfect for 6 to 8 pages. I scavenge, I dig up my own work. I also understand that getting an editor to say yes is so contextual to who that editor is, where they are, what friends they have in the industry who they're already hiring, what the schedule looks like. You're up against everyone's ideas that might have the same hook as yours, or on comic book covers might look like the same idea or something like that. So there's just all these things out there in the universe that make it really hard to get to yes. And with the idea that I just produce my own work anyway with comics, like there's no way I'm going to like let all that beautiful art go to waste. I'm going to self-publish it in some way. And now with crowdfunding, it allows me to do that without sinking more costs into printing costs. I've got another 104 pager that I think we're going to split up into issues and try to build an audience for, and try to build successes that way. It's called Gonad the Barbarian. It is like Mad Magazine meets heavy metal, while very PG-13. It's all about sex puns, like, well, I should say sexual organ puns and things like that. Really goofy stuff. There's actually no, sex or swear words or anything like that. There's a ton of barbarian violence, of course. I always get a response back. You've at least made something that someone wants. If an editor emails you back to say no, that means they at least like appreciated it on some level, because otherwise you're just never going to hear an answer. I always get like a chuckled no, even via email, like, haha, no, on that one, which makes me think it's gotta have some legs out there in the world. And because it's already done, I can set a really low Kickstarter, and this one wasn't expensive to produce. And then if we ever have comic book conventions again that I feel safe enough to go to, I'll have something for the table and just sell that way, because that's where the income comes in, is selling your wares at conventions, and self-published or published. I'm a very good hand seller at conventions. I can sell you my books. I worked for Barnes & Noble for something like 10 years. And so I can sell you a book.
The younger generation is looking at your work and they're becoming inspired to be creative in their own way. And how can they inspire the generation that follows them?
Well, you gotta finish stuff and get it out there, or no one's gonna see it. I think that's the biggest hang up. You see new people come on the scene in, like, I don't know, Facebook groups and stuff like that. And you see them be like, I've got a universe of 50 characters and we're going to do animation and TV and like serial spin-offs. And you're like, whoa. Just make a comic, man. Just do, like, try to get 4 pages into an anthology before you try to start your multimedia corporation, because you cannot do that without lots of wealth. Make comics, release them, and that's your inspiration. Is your work. And then, try to be a decent person on the other side of that. Don't abuse people. Take criticism from voices and perspectives that aren't your own about your work, with grace and understanding, and that no matter what your experiences are, you have a limited view of the world and America. And so if you push something out that is insensitive or accidentally insensitive, try not to become defensive. Listen and try to do better the next time. And maybe as you progress, there are things like sensitivity editors that you can hire. I obviously think a lot about the predominance of white male creators in this business and my role in that, and I don't know, the traps I've accidentally created for myself and fallen into. But that's what's so great about comics and the rise of comics and digital media, is the diversity that is coming from the bottom up. Pretty unique in the crossover from fandom to creator, where that immediacy either of, like, you could just make something on your computer and print it out in your printer, and it's a comic book that you can go sell to someone, or put it up on the web and have people see it that way. That's exciting. The real answer is that the youth of today are going to inspire the youth of tomorrow, regardless, just by existing and creating art.
Well, I do hate to say this, Jeff, but that ends this particular episode of Two Geeks Talking. But before I let you go, where can we find, of course, Killer Bad and, of of course, your stuff on social media.
Thank you. Well, I've had a great time talking with you today, Kurt, and I really appreciate the opportunity. You can go to jeffwrites.com. That's one F, JEFWRITES.com. That you can read a lot of my comic short stories that I've self-published there, or links to my published work. Where we're really trying to drive traffic is killerbad.com, which takes you to the Kickstarter. If you search Killer Bad 2 Works on Kickstarter, you'll also find it. It is prolific in all of my social media right now, which is usually Jeff_UK. Again, I was in that band Americans UK, so my stage name was Jeff UK. That's always one F, JEF_UK, and that's on Instagram and on Twitter. You can also find Americans-UK.com for all of your sci-fi rock needs.
Well, I can't wait to see this Kickstarter become successful. I can't wait to see what you have in the future. I definitely want to have you back on for sure, and much success to you. And I can't really wait to see, your next song for your band as well too.
So thank you. Awesome. Thank you. Yes, please watch our videos both on our website and on YouTube. I think they're pretty fantastic. We did pretty amazing jobs, and I think you'll be blown away about what people in their apartments in Brooklyn can pull off.
That ends this particular episode of Two Geeks Talking. Of course, you can find this interview and thousands of others since 2008 on our website, tgtmedia.com, as well as our YouTube channel, youtube.com/c/tgtmedia. And as I say every week, everyone has a story to tell. It's up to me to help bring that out. Thanks for listening and watching on Two Geeks Talking.
Thank you, Kurt.
You're welcome. Hey, all, Kurt Sasso here from Two Geeks Talking. If you like this video and these quick clips here, make sure you take a look at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/tgtmedia. Make sure you hit the likes button and subscribe as well. Hit the bell to make sure you get notifications, of course, from videos like this here. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching over the years, and keep listening and watching for new and exciting interviews with talented and creative people in the entertainment industry. I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. Thank you so much.